What is diversity? What is diversity? What is diversity? What is diversity? What is spirituality? Spirituality. 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 How do they diver? How do they diver? How do they diver? How do they convert? How do they convert? How do they convert? How are we different? How are we different? How are we different? How are we the same? How are we the same? How are we the same? What is diversity? What is diversity? What is diversity? What is spirituality?
This is Cindy Franklin for the Diversity and Spirituality Network podcast. In case you're not familiar with us, the Diversity and Spirituality Network is an emerging community of people who are exploring the integration of diversity and spirituality. Rosie Nestingin is a great consultant and project manager, but today I'm going to interview her about a unique aspect of her life and work history that has given her a powerful window onto diversity and spirituality, and many illuminating stories to share. Rosie is an African-American woman who as a child grew up in a very multiracial environment at home, yet in one of the whitest states in the United States, North Dakota, where only slightly more than 1% of the population have any African-American ancestry. Then as a young woman, Rosie won the title of Miss North Dakota through the Miss America Scholarship Organization, and for a year, she chose as her mission to carry the message of embracing diversity around her state. Rosie's parents were deeply religious, and she carried forward into her own life their commitment to welcoming everyone with love, while at the same time forging a spiritual path for herself. I'm delighted that Rosie has agreed to speak with us today. So I guess I'd love to start, as we always do, with the experiential. Tell me a little bit about the role of diversity connecting with different groups of people in your early life.
Absolutely. So I was born in Texas and adopted 9 weeks after I was born, and I lived in Fargo, North Dakota for the majority of my upbringing. And in my home, my two parents, myself, I have a younger brother who is 2 years younger than I am, and a younger sister who's 2 years younger than him. My sister and I were both adopted from Texas, but we're not biologically related. And my brother is my parents' biological child. So in our immediate family, my parents are of German and French descent, and so then is my brother, and my sister and I are both African American. So a lot of diversity in our immediate family. But on top of that, my parents opened a daycare when I was growing up. And so at one point, there was 5 kids under 5 in our daycare from different descents. So there was a child from Somalia, there was a child from Vietnam, and there was a lot of different ethnic cuisines and foods really infused into our upbringing. So I remember going to the first day of kindergarten and having hot dogs for lunch and being really confused by that because I was so immersed in different cultures and different languages and different viewpoints, just based on the people in my own home and the people that my family was welcoming into their home. So it's years and years later that I realized that that is not a typical upbringing, but really has laid the fabric for my appreciation and mission to share how important it is to celebrate our diversity. Wow. So that's my upbringing. But on top of that, my parents and my family is very conservative Catholic, and so that was my faith growing up. And I went to Catholic school from kindergarten through 12th grade and practiced that doctrine and learned the ins and outs of Catholicism. So that was really a heavily, part of my upbringing that was really the center and the focus of my parents' mission and continues to be. It wasn't, we weren't just a family that was going to church on Sundays and forgot about church the rest of the week. We were going to church on Sunday and, living the mission of the church day in and day out. And to this day, my parents go to church daily.
Wow. So that really, that kind of, you underscored my point that you are both from a very, very, very religious household and a very, very, very diverse household.
Yes.
Was that part of their spirituality, is to embrace diversity? Did they see that as connected? Because you were born into that wonderfully diverse environment. I'm wondering if they created it very intentionally or if it just was a natural unfolding.
I think when they, so even one more factor that I shouldn't forget and don't want to forget is before I was born, my parents were married 14 years before they adopted me.
Wow.
And in that time frame, they had a foster child from Vietnam who was about, I think, 16 years older than I was. So they kind of acted as foster parent when he was 8 years old and put him through elementary, middle school, and then high school. And so he was really woven into the fabric of their just love of helping. And their mission and living their faith was one of helping people who need help and who raise their hand and ask for it. And so I think that maybe they didn't realize the fabric that they were weaving as they were creating this nest of diversity in their home day in and day out. But they were very aware that, we don't have a lot, but we can share what we do have. And that's still the message that I get from them today. And that's really one that I have tried to live by in my own life.
Wow. So generosity, sharing, and
yes.
giving to people who seem like they might benefit from that, regardless of who they may be, was just a really, really deep ethic that they carry.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's important to mention also, my father worked outside the home. He worked maintenance, and my mother didn't. She stayed at home and she ran the daycare. So, it really was limited resource as far as what they could offer, but I still am amazed by the way that they were able to share and open their home and share meals. And it was just never a question of if someone was going to come over for dinner. It was, when are they coming over? When are they available to be here? And we'll break bread together. So that's really, I think, something that isn't common.
It isn't common. No, it isn't common. It's touching to me that you would say that you didn't realize until many years later that this wasn't common, how your parents lived. And one of the reasons is, when I think of North Dakota, I don't think of it as a very diverse state. So to me, to have what you described, this wonderful little nest of diversity, and you describe it with so much warmth. So it seems like the love and the sweetness of it was also unusual, not just the diversity. That sort of inoculated you in some way from noticing that wasn't the norm outside of your home. Is that accurate how I'm hearing that, or?
Yeah, I think that's definitely accurate. Being the oldest in my family, I definitely felt the shift from the nest the soonest as I was in elementary school. And it was really apparent to me, just because of the way that my classmates looked, that none of them looked like me. No one in the entire school looked like me, until there was one student that came when I was in third grade that was African American, and she was only at the school for 1 year. So it was really an isolated experience in that way. I think what made me feel more included was going home, because everybody looked different and, interacted in different ways. And so that was really a comfort.
Was there a painful sense of difference when you went to school and nobody looked like you? Did it feel kind of alienating and painful?
I think I got really good as a kid, and maybe as an adult, to try to deflect those feelings, but more so turn them into teaching moments, or, ask the person who's confused some questions to kind of make them understand, or try to help them understand maybe why that was making me feel uncomfortable. So something that I still do to this day, as an example, and I did it as a kid, I came up with it as a kid, is someone will ask, well, where are you from? And to most people, I mean, if someone in North Dakota asked my mom that question, who's of German descent and is white and looks like everyone on our block, she would say, I'm from Fargo, and that's not confusing, and that's where the conversation ends. But when someone asks me that question as an African American woman, even as a kid, I knew that it was a loaded question. So I would say Fargo. And then there would be confusion and pause, even with the other children. And as an adult, people ask me that continually. And so I always turn it around and say, well, where are you from? And that even adds more confusion. Like, why are you should know where I'm from. I'm from Fargo, or I'm from Minneapolis. You should, and it's like, I don't know, and you shouldn't assume that I'm not from this region. So that's really been my tactic in it, is just kind of turning it on people to see what their reaction would be.
Do you think that when you do that, that they have an aha moment, that they realize their question was maybe a little bit more loaded than they had thought?
You can see it in their eyes. As soon as you turn the question on them, it's kind of like, oh, that's how that sounds. Yeah. That's how that question is worded. And, it's not a moment for an apology. It's just a realization, I believe. I hope.
I love that. I was talking to some of our colleagues the other day about how do you deal with, in this case, like sexism in the workplace, and when you hear people say things, and my thought is the same as yours is, sometimes you can ask a question, you don't say, that what you just said sounds XYZ. You ask a question where they reflect on it a little bit, and then, it kind of shows up for them.
Right,
So
exactly.
It's amazing that you already had the skill of doing that as a young child. Fantastic.
And I think also, people ask me that a lot as a kid, so I had to figure out a way to come up with a question or a way to pose it on them that, wasn't hurtful for me, because, and in that way, it felt like, well, now we've opened the conversation up. I don't think those are the words I would have used when I was 7 and came up with it, but that's what I've landed on now. Mm-hmm.
And actually, the way you did it wasn't hurtful for you or for them.
Right.
It gave them a chance to reflect. I can see how you were an ambassador teaching your state about diversity before you became Miss North Dakota.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
So, I can talk a little bit about that experience.
Sure. Well, actually.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, yes. Let's just go right into that. I was going to ask another question, but I think this is a good place to just go right into that.
Okay.
So I was going to ask you what drew you to that work, but I think you've already started describing it. I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think growing up in Fargo, I just decided that it was kind of my mission and my personal mission. I don't think I ever said this out loud, but I wanted to feel like there was no barrier of what I looked like or didn't look like between me and my peers. And so I think because of that, I just by nature, this is partially just my character and maybe partially part of that mission. I will sign up for everything and anything. I'm always on board to be on a team or a committee or extracurricular. I just love to connect with people and really am extroverted in that way. But as I was joining these different groups and into high school and college, it just came this undertone that people were interested to learn more about my background. And that was around the time when I was realizing, my upbringing wasn't normal. Like having just so much diversity in my immediate family, but then having my family extended to other families, that is not the norm. And so I just started talking about it because I wanted to share my experience and also just, turn it on people to ask themselves those questions. Like, what are some assumptions or some stereotypes maybe your that are in your head that you need to challenge? And so I was doing a lot of this, especially in college, and one of my best friends, excuse me, had won the title of Miss North Dakota. And one of her guidance counselors had signed her up, so it wasn't something that she signed up for herself, but it's through the Miss America organization, and it's a scholarship program. And so her guidance counselor said, I know you have student loans, you should definitely consider this. She kind of hemmed and hawed her way through it. The guidance counselor signed her up, and she won.
Wow.
So by nature, she was trying to recruit me for this program. And after 4 years of kind of wearing me down and, really pitching it to me in a way that was really helpful. She said, it's a scholarship organization, so you'll get scholarship money. That's great. the second piece is that you're also a musician. So I'm a pianist first, vocalist second, and then dabble in other instruments, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, that are not as not as serious. But and she's like, so you get an opportunity to perform. Another thing that you're already doing. And lastly, you get to talk about diversity. You get to do it statewide. And that's something that you're already doing in your community and in your school, but you could be doing this could be your job for the year and your mission. It's a year of service.
Now,
you could do it.
Was that part of the intent that the person who won would talk about diversity? Or I thought you chose that once you won.
Oh, yes. So my mission always was to talk about diversity. Each participant, though, talks about their own mission.
Okay.
So yes, so I selected diversity.
Yes.
The girl next to me selected a different topic. Yes. So my mission was diversity.
Yes.
And so that's really what drew me in. I was excited to pursue that option, and I competed at the state level a few times before I won and learned a lot along the way. And as I was competing, got to even expand my reach. And then I held the title of Miss North Dakota in 2012.
Wonderful. Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So I was going to ask, how did your spiritual values connect to your interest in this work? And I know there's many, many different definitions of spirituality. Just before, I found one from Brene Brown that I thought might resonate. She says spirituality is recognizing and celebrating that we're all inextricably connected to each other by a power greater than all of us, and that our connection to that power and to one another is grounded in love and compassion. So I don't know if that was similar or different, or what your swimming in the world that you're describing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my mission, especially when I was touring North Dakota, but just in life, is just being connected with people. So I've found in my life that my easiest and most natural connector to the universe and to other people is through music, through song. And so I knew that in every piece of my year as Miss North Dakota, I wanted to incorporate music, and I wanted to have that be the connector to break down any barriers that could be there or might have been there even before I stepped in the room. And so every presentation I gave, there was a large portion that was based on music. And the way that I went about it was I wanted to make sure that I was, showing that music is very diverse. There's a lot of differences in music, a lot of genres, a lot of writers, a lot of performers. And the ways in which we interact with music is something that really is around us all the time. Whether you're at the grocery store and you hear a song on the radio, if you're at the grocery store and it's silent, you would notice. Or if you're in the car, listening to the radio, you're listening to, your headphones. There's so many different ways that music impact our lives and we don't realize it. Just as the way that we treat others and others treat us and we are interacting with them impact our lives. And you get to choose how you do that. So my connector was really, it's like I said, has always been music. But I think that in that way, it was a really easy way to open the door. It was not, I wasn't coming down with this really difficult, big conversation from the very beginning. As the presentation went on, there's more tough conversations to have. And of course, depending on the group, sometimes you're talking to kindergartners. So this word diversity means nothing to them at that moment. But you can explain to them that, if you're sitting alone and someone's making fun of you, why are they doing that? And are they making fun of you because you're different? Well, that's not good. And that's not right. And so it's something as simple as, I love this exercise, and it went over so well with kids especially, but I would designate 5 kids to come up to the front of the stage and designate one of the kids that had purple eyes. And, kids are just like, purple eyes, what? They're just laughing. And then you're going through the motions of the reason that you're treating this person different is because they have purple eyes. Isn't that silly? That doesn't make any sense. So explaining it to a kindergartner and having a conversation, kind of high level, but something that I hope they remember, like that, versus having a conversation with a bank in the middle of like Minot, North Dakota, population 50,000 people, population of minorities less than 2%. I mean, those are different conversations.
Yes.
And you kind of have to get to the heart of the matter. And there it's just about testing different stereotypes that we have developed and where they're coming from. And it's a lot of asking questions. And that's where the good conversations and the hard conversations, but the most connected conversations come up from I think those moments.
So asking questions, provoking reflection, and doing it young, doing it with little children so that they can already have a frame in their mind. I love doing that purple eyes exercise. I mean, on one level, of course, it sounds silly, but that then if somebody is treated different based on some physical characteristic, they think back on that and think, well, that's as silly as what we did in class. That's so silly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And another just exercise that I did that I think really would test stereotypes. So at the time, I would look up the hashtag stereotype on Twitter every morning, and I would read the top 5 tweets that came up with the hashtag stereotype. So that was an interactive way for me to show them there are so many stereotypes that exist in the world, especially for high schoolers who are on their phones all the time.
Yeah.
And here's 5 that I found an hour ago. And so we would unpack that. But the best way that I could showcase stereotypes and truly leads back to my upbringing and things that have happened to me and things that I've made happen in my life are testing stereotypes about what a person could look like who has certain qualifications. So I had a long list of attributes to a certain person. Some of these attributes include this person was a cheerleader. This person plays piano. This person was in track and field. This person has 2 parents. One is German, one is French. This person has, and the list goes on and on and on. And you discover over time that this person is me. This person plays accordion. That's the one that always would snag people. This person plays accordion.
Wow.
And that's usually the last one I would say. And that was always really confusing. And so it threw them off the scent. But that
and
person.
Would you say to them, so who do you think this person is? Or which person in the room is this?
Or they'd say, who do you think it is? And a lot of the answers were, it's one of our teachers, or it's, the kid who plays piano at the school, and so it was really fun to challenge them to say, you probably didn't think that this person is me.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
Wow. What a great exercise. What a great exercise. Wow. When you would do this with people, or when you would, so I have a question. I'm trying to think of how to ask it.
Sure.
Is that, how does that, like, it feels to me that this kind of exploration, this kind of question, it provokes a change in somebody's thinking and maybe in how they interact with the next person. How does it change, if it does, their way of being with themselves? How does it change their way of relating to, if you have the category of spiritual growth? Do you see it related to that, or do you see it as a very different part of life?
I think it's definitely related to spiritual growth because, personally, I think that the more aware you are of, the more awareness that you have of yourself and how you portray yourself and how you interact with others, but then also to be aware that, other people are bringing different experiences and different assumptions to the table. And so I think that definitely ties into spirituality because the way in which you're doing that is how everyone sees you and how everyone can interact with you and can connect with you. So being more aware of those pieces of your life, I think it's never a bad thing, but I do think that they are connected.
Yeah.
I think the trick is to figure out in which ways you can connect them and how to create that open space to have those moments and have those conversations. And that's the ultimate challenge, I think.
Yeah. I have all these different questions and ideas that are crowding, and they're all raising their hands inside of me.
Okay.
One is just honestly remembering when I was in Peru and I met this man who had such a different life from me. He had no running water and he had a presence. Feel he could see things about me, knowing people couldn't see in general. And I thought, oh my goodness, this person knows me. And so what does that mean? Because they don't speak the same language. We have had nothing in common. But I feel known when I sit together with this person. It made me feel a different part of myself than what I usually feel. So thinking how, for me, that's been true. Connecting with difference has made me feel a different, almost spiritual presence, and how that's there, and sometimes covered over by more superficial things that we can connect with each other on. But so that's really fascinating that you found so many ways of doing this. What was most challenging for you? So it feels like, there was many exciting things that you're sharing, and it's exciting to think how this was transforming people. Were there parts of it that really challenging?
Oh, absolutely. I think, as you get to select your topic as Miss North Dakota or whichever state you're representing, there are definitely different, I would say, levels. Mm-hmm. There's not, good, bad, worse, whatever. But I think there's different emotional levels of topics that you can select. And something that I underestimated about traveling around the state of North Dakota by myself as an African American woman in her 20s, talking to a very homogenous state about diversity was going to be emotionally draining. I didn't plan for that. And because of that, and because the schedule is so rigorous, I would do anywhere from 4 to 5 presentations in a day. And I could start my morning with kindergartners and have a really long 2-hour in-depth conversation with business leaders, and then go back to an elementary school and do it with third graders. And so you just have to shift into these different modes. That was difficult just because I wasn't able to process for myself what all of this was doing to my own emotional stability, because I'm constantly talking about adoption and constantly talking about diversity. And while that is so important, and I love talking about it, and I think it's really important to discuss, it does take a toll on you when you're unable to kind of empathize or even share your thoughts with someone as you're going through it. So that's one piece of it.
So if I understood, it was partly that that your experience was that you had to constantly explain it is to be, if I could say it, if I'm understanding it correctly, it's an unempathic field that people didn't naturally connect, that you had to always go more than 50%, more than 80%, more than 90% sometimes, that you had been empathizing and could connect with how they look at things, but that you were traveling the distance for them as well as for you. Am I getting a little bit what was exhausting, or could you?
Yeah. Yes, I think that was definitely a piece of it. And also, I kind of became this one-woman council to all of these schools that I was visiting, especially schools, and some organizations as well. But, after my presentation, or even weeks after I had done a presentation at their school, I would get calls and emails with these really heavy situations, and they would be looking for advice. And that to me felt so difficult, because I felt like I had opened the door And so the conversation had started when I was there, and not as a result of, but kind of in conjunction with the timing of everything. There was just things that were happening in schools that people wanted advice on. What should we do if, for example, a new kid has come to town, and new kid from the South, and he's African American, and the second day of class, he has the N-word written on his locker. What should we do? One of our parents won't stop calling the African American kids in our school the N-word. What should we do? I mean, so it's things like these moments like this where I didn't have a good answer. And I still feel like it was a little bit unfinished, only because I think that the work could continue for years and years after.
Yes.
And that's how you make change, and that's how you make progress. But
Yes.
because it was just a 1-year tenure, I've stayed in touch with a handful of people and communities, but it really is programming that should be in a yearly, if not more, calendar cycle. And so that was really exhausting because I felt like, personally, I just felt like I couldn't fix it. And I didn't know if, I would say, here's what I would do if I were in your situation.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is the exact answer that's going to fix your problem, but if I were that student, I would feel like this. And if I were a parent, they might feel like this. And as a teacher or a principal, it's your duty to make sure that, the parent and the student and the kids that have done this, it's kind of like writing this rubric for them that I found myself writing over and over for different scenarios and at different grade levels. I mean,
yeah, it must feel strange to be a young person having to tell grown-ups things. It just feels like, how the hell could they not know this? On the one hand, and then on the other hand, it's all on you to keep this conversation about diversity light and keep them in a good mood, when in fact there's tremendous cruelty, pain, and suffering.
Yeah.
It's part of this conversation, and it's, to be able to have a conversation without acknowledging that has got to be also heavy, because you're feeling it.
Right.
It's all on your doorstep, and they're not sharing the burden, I could see.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That was definitely what made the experience and talking about it so exhausting, is not having an answer to provide, upon request.
Yeah.
And I think, a lot of the areas that I spoke to were in rural America.
Yeah.
And if you haven't been to rural, small town, probably not North Dakota, but another place like it, an example just to show the lack of diversity. When I showed up to a town of 700 people in North Dakota called Ashley, that was the name of the town. I showed up and, mentioned I was talking about diversity and explained, a little bit of what I needed and where we would go with the presentation. And the principal and I were going over this. And he said, well, just so you know, the only diversity we have in our town is that there are some people that aren't German. Like, everyone's white, but there's like a couple people that are not German. That's it. And that's the only type of diversity, or even we would even associate with diversity that we see. Everyone drives the same kind of car. Everyone goes to the same church because there's one in town. Like, it's just very homogenous. And so even this idea of thinking about the way that you think about diversity and changing and challenging that, you really have to start high level, because you can't get into the deep end when the base knowledge is very different from what a lot of people in a metropolitan area would experience.
Yeah, that's quite extraordinary to think of that, and to come from the family you came from, the experience you come from. Where in your family there was probably about 2,000% more diversity than there was in this town of 700 people.
Absolutely.
Is there any one learning from your own path that, if you could just transfer it to people, like you had the background that you've had, and if there was, there's some moments, for example, I've had a long meditation path, and sometimes I go to a place in my meditation and I feel, oh, I wish I could just give this to somebody and say, taste this, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm so curious about what it is that has come to your spirit or your soul or however you think about it through your background and also through what you've done with your background, that if you could just transfer it into other people, you think it would help them and you'd love to have it shared.
I think it would be twofold. I think the first piece that I have to believe, and I do believe, is that people are inherently good. And so they're also inherently curious. And so a lot of questions that are posed, or maybe stereotypes that they've adapted, comes from a place of curiosity. But I do believe that people are inherently good. So that keeps me going, and I think has always informed my path and definitely continues to do that. The other one that is harder for me to live out every day, but I do think is also true, is that you don't have to agree with somebody to love them. And I think that's guided me in my adult life more so. And that's really also really important, but I think that's harder to grasp onto. But that's something that I try to help guide me and guide my meditation, guide my spiritual path, guide my life and my growth. It's important.
Would it be okay to ask you to share an example of where that's really been up for you in your life, where maybe in your close relationships in some way where you realize, oh, I really don't disagree with this person, and I have to let it not reduce my ability to love them.
Right. So absolutely, I can think of a handful of examples, but the one that sticks out the most would be my husband and I got married the Friday after the election, and we had 200 plus guests from ultra conservative to ultra liberal in attendance, and every single person that was attending we loved, and we wanted to make sure that whatever table you were seated at, you felt comfortable and you weren't going to get into a big debate, because the day was about love and these good people that were surrounding us. So that was really a moment where my husband and I had to decide, how are we going to make sure that everyone is feeling supported and loved in this experience? And we had a priest and a pastor preside over our wedding. And so leading up to the week, we had decided that the two words that we wanted to really share for our worship was, we really wanted to focus on patience. So patience with listening, patience with the process, and also unity. And that was really the theme throughout. So we brought it up many times throughout the day. We gave a speech at the beginning, and it was about how, we're not talking about politics. That's not what this is about. This is about love. This is about unity. This is about sharing this experience and being patient with all of us as we move through it. That's just really kind of how we've lived our life. But that's the moment that I can think of the most, where there's just so many opinions and so many different opinions. And I love every single person in this room so much. And I can disagree with you. Today's not the day I'm going to do it, but I can disagree with you, but I still love you and care about you and care about your well-being, just because we vote for different parties or, things differently. That's okay with me.
That's really beautiful. And it makes me imagine that actually just by extending love to people, if anything might change, the political spectrum towards a more beneficial outcome for all of us, it'll probably happen with that mood behind it first before content behind it in some way. So
I hope so. Yeah. Thank you.
My last question for you was going to be, how does all this inform your life in ways that are invisible to others? So, I'm kind of imagining, you were talking about helping people question their assumptions. I'm kind of imagining that, for example, would be one of your superpowers helping people work well together,
Mm-hmm.
that it would translate into many domains, helping people. So I'm just wondering, what would be one or two ways that you think your background has?
Right. I think that my career path has been in a couple different industries, but the common thread in each of them is that I'm always the person that's thinking 10 steps ahead as a project manager, and also the person that's asking questions about details. So, someone can say one thing on a call, but actually they mean these 10 other things need to get done. So my job is asking a lot of questions and trying to unpack really what those questions mean. So I think that in a way, when I was traveling around North Dakota, it was unpacking some of these stereotypes and assumptions, asking questions to try to better understand where along the lines those assumptions came into play, and then challenging them because I was kind of being the example in a way of, you've made these assumptions and let me try to challenge you in them. But I try to do that, and how it connects to my professional life is I think that it's really important to understand where people are at, whether it's where they're at in a project, where they're at in their career, where they're at in their day. And I think because I'm able to do that, or I know that I'm good at listening. So I really try to absorb and take in where people are at instead of assuming things, especially when I'm managing projects.
Wonderful.
I think it's helped me in my professional career as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a real pleasure
you.
speaking with you. I knew it would be, and I learned so much just
thank
having
you.
a conversation, a lot to contemplate. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome.
What is diversity? What is diversity? What is diversity? What is diversity? What is spirituality? Spirituality, spirituality, spirituality. How do they diver? How do they diver? How do they diver? How do they convert? How do they convert? How do they convert? How are we different? How are we different? How are we different? How are we the same? How are we the same? How are we the same? What is diversity? What is diversity? What is diversity? What is spirituality? Spirituality.